Hello and welcome to another video. This is where I'm going to explain what happens when I differentiate an integral, or what happens when I integrate a derivative. So we know that a function g of x, its derivative of f of x, hence g prime of x gives me f of x. If I integrate f of x in between a and b, I'm going to get g of b minus g of a. Realize that, right? Because the derivative of g of x gives me f of x. So when I integrate f of x, I get g of x, right? Great. So what happens if I have the following expression? Now look at this curve. This is the derivative of the integration. It's the derivative of the integration. Now what's going to happen is I'm going to end up having the derivative of g of b minus g of a. And that's going to give me 0. Because they're not in terms of x anymore, they become constants. So this is one small thing to understand. If I have the derivative in terms of x of this expression, it's just going to give me 0. Unless what? Unless I have an x somewhere here. That's the only case in which it's not going to be that way. So here's that example here. Again, I have g prime of x gives me f of x. If I have this situation here, what would I end up with? Well, I would end up with the following expression. I would end up with the derivative in terms of x of g of x minus g of a. Now this part here, again, is a constant, so this one's going to disappear now. And I'm going to end up just having the derivative of g of x. But that's going to be f of x. So what's going to happen here is that I'm going to end up with this, which is going to be f of x. Hence, this situation here. Now these kind of problems are relatively common. And an important thing to keep in mind is you have to think in terms of what variable do I have here? What variable am I integrating for? What variables do I have here? And what variables do I have here? And you might wonder, so how are they going to ask me to use this? How is this going to appear in the exam? Well, let's take a look. Here's an easy sort of situation. They ask you to solve this. Now they ask you to solve this, and if you try to integrate this, if you try to integrate cos of t squared, and this is what a lot of you might end up doing, you're desperately trying to integrate this. No matter how. But the thing is actually really difficult to do it. Really difficult. You won't be able to do it with your standard tools. So how do I integrate that thing? Well, I don't have to. I don't have to integrate it. Why not? Because I'm going to make the derivative straight afterwards. And from a previous realization that, if I have this, it can just put f of x straight away. I don't have to worry about what the integration of that is, because I'm going to make the derivative straight after. So directly, I can just say, well, this is cos of x squared, and be done with it. No problem. So this is a situation in which you use this realization that we talked about earlier on. Now, this is what happens whenever I integrate. I will, substitute the t for an x, and make the derivative, the part with a will turn to 0 because it's a constant. So that's what's going to happen. And you have to think in these terms, because I can't really come up with the exact example, exact situation in which this might become useful. But you always have to keep this in mind. Let's look at another example. Look at this one here. Now, okay, so in this case here, y is not an expression of x. It's not like an implicit differentiation where y was always an expression of x, so we had to keep it in mind. Okay, I'm going to have the derivative of this whole thing here. But because y is not an expression of x, the derivative of this whole thing here, cos y is just a constant, right? Now, the difficult thing here is to understand that what's going to happen is that this is going to just become 2x times cos y, because cos y is a constant. And it still is between a and b. But that's it. And now I have this, the 2x. Well, I don't have to differentiate that. That is a constant now. So that thing can go outside. And now I can just integrate this thing in terms of y. So again, the only thing you have to do very carefully is read these things carefully. Read these dy's, these dx's, and these a and b's carefully. And that's what's going to allow you to do and get through these slightly confusing exercises at first. They become very easy later on. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.